All right, I think that we can go ahead and get started, Dan.
Great. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Maine Preservation's 53rd annual meeting. My name is Dan Walsh. I'm the Vice President of Board of Trustees of Maine Preservation, and thank you for joining us this afternoon. I'd also like to thank our preservation champions and major donors who generously contributed $5,000 or more in the last year. Richard Anderson, Linda Bean, Diana Bean, Jim Brady, Greg Boulis, Rosalie and Christopher Glass, Tara Kelly and Joe Pizzulo, Dee Dee Stockley, Cindy and Robert Taylor, Anna Marie and John E. Throne, Amy Woodhouse and Toby Scott, and Willie Wong. You've all taken Maine preservation to a new level, and we thank you very much. These very generous patrons provide a strong underpinning for all of our activities and our events. I also want to extend my appreciation to our sponsors, starting with the generosity of Norway Savings Bank as your presenting sponsor. We're also grateful for the support from Schinberg Properties, Linda Bean's Maine Kitchen, Freeport Antiques and Heirlooms, and Platts Associates industry leaders. We're also deeply grateful for our underwriter, lead, and supporting sponsors who are also listed here. We have a fantastic program for all of you today. First is our short annual business meeting. I would now like to officially call to order the 2024 annual business meeting of Maine Preservation. This meeting is for the members of Maine Preservation. If you are not a member of Maine Preservation, please refrain from voting on the motions or elections of trustees. That said, we hope you will join Maine Preservation soon. A link to the minutes from last year's meeting was sent to the pre-registrants and is included in the chat. I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Thank you. I thought I might have to change.
Thank you. Feel free to type
up. We're a shy group, but we're a strong group. I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Sure.
There we go. Thank you. We will now put a poll on the screen, and all those in favor vote aye. Those opposed vote nay.
So I'm having a little technical difficulty with our polls. So we might just have to use our raise hand feature. And again, if members only, unless
looks like the poll is out there, Tara.
Oh, it's there? Okay, great.
I see it.
I can't see. So thank you.
All right. The poll is there. So if everyone could vote on the first motion, that would be great. Yeah, I'm not sure whether this is going to show this. We might need to go just to have people say aye, because I can't see the results of the.
Yeah, no, honestly, I'm not sure. I can't see anything with related to the poll for some reason. So
let's do it the old. Let's do. Let me improvise a bit, and you tell me if this works. We have a motion. We have a second. Is there anyone opposed to the motion? Hearing none, the motion is approved.
There you go.
Are you comfortable with that, Tara?
That sounds great.
Okay, great. I would now like to introduce our Executive Director, Tara Kelly, and also our Technical Advisor. She's really good at technology, to give the Treasurer's Report.
Thank you, Dan. And I'm sorry, usually my technology does work better, but for some reason, I'm able to do both this evening. At any rate, this is the report for our fiscal year ending in 2022, which covered April 1st, 2023 to March 31st, 2024. In revenue, we ended the fiscal year with a $13,615 and $30 deficit. Our total assets are $987,585.66, which includes restricted funds or easement management and for easement management and other activities. Long-term investments are maintained at the Maine Community Foundation. We had $828,290.50 in our two easement funds at the beginning of the fiscal year and ended the fiscal year with $863,314.87. This represents an increase of $35,024.37 over the course of the last fiscal year due to market conditions. The organization holds no debts or mortgages. In expenses, the organization successfully reduced expenses throughout the year to narrow the deficit. This concludes the Treasurer's report for the past fiscal year. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Tara. I'd now like to introduce Governance Committee Chair Scott Stevens to give the nominating committee report.
Having some technical fun here, just one moment. I'll be with you in a second.
There we go.
Okay. Thank you, Dan. I too would like to welcome everyone. I'm pleased to begin the nominating report by placing in nomination for their initial 3-year term as trustees of Maine Preservation, Rob Harville of Scarborough, Shaw Sprague of Cape Elizabeth, Marieka Thorman of Freeport. I should have inserted an and between Shaw and Marieka there. So those three, I place their names on behalf of the nominating committee, which as a committee motion does not require a second, and I move the question.
Is there anyone opposed to the motion? Hearing none, the motion is approved. Thank you.
Great. Next, I'd like to place a nomination for their second 3-year term as a trustee of Maine Preservation, Susan Cheryl Axelrod of Woolwich.
Is there anyone opposed to this motion? Hearing none, the motion is approved.
Next, I'd like to place in nomination for their initial 1-year term as an advisory trustee of Maine Preservation, Rick Bisson of Woolwich, James Brady of Portland, Elizabeth Henshaw of Camden, and Daniel Walsh of Falmouth. Before we take the vote, I want to recognize the hard work and dedication of these 4 individuals. Rick, Jim, Betsy, and Dan have all made tremendous contributions to Maine Preservation, and we are so grateful for their years of service as trustees. We're thrilled that they're willing to continue as advisory trustees.
Thank you, Scott. Is there anyone opposed to the motion? Hearing none, the motion is approved.
Finally, I would now like to place in nomination the current advisory trustees as printed on the program. I will not read their names. There are a lot of them. The nominating committee places the group as printed in the program in nomination, and I move the question.
Is there anyone opposed to the motion? Hearing none, the motion is approved. Thank you, Scott.
Well, thank you.
Thank you for the report of the nominating committee, and my heartfelt welcome to our new trustees and advisory trustees. I now entertain a motion to adjourn the 2024 annual meeting.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second. Thank you. Is anyone opposed? Hearing none, the motion is approved and the meeting is officially adjourned. I'll now hand the reins over to our Executive Director, Tara Kelly, to give us an update on the priority initiatives at Maine Preservation.
All right, back again. Thank you, Dan, and thank you, Scott, for helping us through the meeting this afternoon and for bearing with it, to all of you for bearing with the technical difficulties here. So, as most of you know, we are a statewide preservation organization. We promote and preserve Maine's historic fabric, which in turn stimulates cultural and economic vitality across the state. We have 5 key areas of work, and today I'll highlight some updates on each of them from the past year. Beginning with technical assistance that we provide to homeowners, nonprofit organizations, local governments, businesses, you name it. Last summer, we spent a full week in Aroostook County. It might be simpler to tell you where we didn't go. We checked in at Sherman, Colton, Presque Isle, Caribou, Van Buren, Madawaska, Leal, New Sweden, Fort Kent, and Island Falls. At each stop, we met with advocates, property and business owners, community members to tour historic sites, offer advice, build upon our understanding and appreciation of the challenges and priorities for Mainers in Aroostook County. And then in October, we toured Greenville along the mighty Moosehead Lake. We began with a cruise aboard the National Register listed steamboat Katahdin, visited the Moosehead Historical Society, checked in with Greenville Junction Depot friends who've been working hard to restore the town's 1889 depot for more than 10 years. A meet and greet was organized by the Moosehead Maritime Museum, and that allowed us to broaden our outreach to neighboring communities in Dexter, Abbott, Shirley, Monson, and Rockwood. Before departing, we toured the National Register listed Shaw House and the Greenville Inn, and made a scenic drive to Rockwood, a hotbed of historic Maine sporting camps with spectacular views of Mount Kineo. Next week, the entire Maine preservation staff will be headed to MDI. So if anybody is dialing in from there, we'd love to see you next week. 2 sites that we visited during our residencies this year, Musée Culturel de Mont-Carmel and Greenville Junction Depot, have benefited from our grant program. Over the last 5 years, we've administered nearly $500,000 in preservation grants to 84 projects throughout the state, made possible through funding from the 1772 Foundation. This year, we've provided $126,700 to 21 projects listed here. The grants ranged in amount from $1,700 to a maximum of $10,000. Here are just 2 examples. On the left, we have the Garing House in Bethel, in bad need of sill repair, among other things, which is going to become workforce housing after rehabilitation by the Northern Forest Center. And on the right, the Hurricane Valley Farm Barn, in need of a new roof to better support their tenant, Cultivating Communities, which is a food justice nonprofit that works with immigrant and refugee farmers. Our work isn't just about the past, though, or even present conditions. It's also about the future, and that's what our easement program does. We hold preservation easements on 44 buildings across the state. We welcomed a new easement to our roster just this afternoon. On the left, the Gingerbread House in Norway, which was a recent honor award winner for its stunning exterior restoration. I'll note that it's for sale. If you're interested in buying it, it's really an incredible project. And then on the right, we also have a contract to accept an easement on the Wallace Haskell Homestead in Pittsburgh. It's under contract, but it has been for sale until recently, and that should be executed in the coming months. Each year, we visit each of these easement properties to monitor conditions, and we also review proposals for alteration, such as the rehabilitation of the circa 1830 ox barn at Sabbath Lake Shaker Village in New Gloucester, where Maine Preservation spent a day working with preservation timber framing crew. You could see us on the left kind of taking a look at the lift of the ox barn this summer, and then on the right, working on the herb house, which incidentally was also lifted just this morning, and Brad and I were there on site with Aaron to take a look at the jacking. We also provide professionals with information on best practices and emerging technologies, and empower everyday Mainers to engage in preservation projects in their own communities. Commissioned by the Heart of Ellsworth with funds from the Hart Family Foundation at the National Trust for Historic Preservation, we designed and presented in person a new 3-part workshop series, Foundations of Preservation, Funding Your Preservation Projects, and Making Old Places New Again, earlier this spring. And just a couple of weeks ago, we held the 3rd James Walk Festival statewide in Maine. Named after community activist Jane Jacobs, the full day of walking conversations is intended to increase engagement and connection with place. We had 49 walks in 35 towns and cities across the state: Bangor, Bath, Belfast, Belgrade Lakes, Bethel, Boothbay, Brunswick, Camden, Kissimmee, Chesapeake, Eastport, Ellsworth, Farmington, Fort Fairfield, Gardner, Greenville, Hollowell, Hinckley, Kennebunk, Leeds, Lewiston, Livermore, Portland, Saco, Scarborough, Springvale, Stonington, Van Buren, Waldoboro, Waterville, Wayne, Wells, Westbrook, Wilton, and York. We're hoping for more next year. We're still counting heads, but we estimate more than 1,000 people participated in walks across the state. And last but not least, we are a voice for Maine in government and in the media. Pictured here are some of our most endangered properties in Maine, a list that we put out every single year. But we also advocate on the state and national level for sound preservation policy to support the rehabilitation of Maine's historic resources. In November, I traveled to Washington, D.C. to visit with our congressional delegation, lobbying for funding for the Maine Historic Preservation Commission and improvements to the federal historic rehabilitation tax credit. See here is, I met with Senator King, who, as a result of our meeting, decided to co-sponsor the HTC Go Act, which is important legislation towards improving the federal tax credit.
Good.
And those of you who were with us last year know that we have been working ardently to build off the success of the existing state historic rehabilitation tax credit to improve the small credit and create a new homeowner program. While our bill LD 1810 was passed by the legislature, it was ultimately not funded at the appropriations table. And you'll know that many other bills met the same fate, including LD 2106, which was also set to improve the substantial credit. However, LD 912, which authorizes a general fund bond issue for historic community buildings, was signed by the governor and will be on the ballot in November. You'll hear more from us about both what was formerly known as LD 1810 and LD 2106 and how they progress next session and what you can do to help us get them across the finish line. And then also how you can vote to enable and get your neighbors, friends, family, and communities to support LD 912 at the ballot in November. So that very quickly is a little bit of a picture of what we've been up to in the last year. In sum, we're here to help you reach out. Happy to travel anywhere, to look at anything historic building related. And from here now, I will be happy to welcome our speakers for the evening. And we'll be starting with Maura McEvoy, Kathleen Hackett, and Basha Burwell to talk about their new book, Maine House II, which highlights the beauty and importance of preservation, restoration, thoughtful renovation, and low impact living. So Kathleen, Maura, Basha, please step up to the microphone. Maura, you're muted.
Hi, everybody. Is Maura unmuted?
Yeah.
And Kathleen?
There we go. Hi, everyone. I'm Maura McEvoy, and I am the photographer and co-author of The Maine House and The Maine House II, which is a book that is out right now. And we'd love to thank Maine Preservation for inviting us here. I feel like it recognizes us as more than just a book with a lot of pretty pictures, you know, that we too have a mission that we're very proud of. And a little back history, we started our first book, we started shooting it in 2017 as a reaction to what we saw, Basha, Kathleen, and I, in our individual communities, pretty much up and down the coast of Maine, where we were watching the disappearance of some beautiful old homes. You know, we heard too often realtors say, oh, that's a tear down, you know, and it just seemed to be happening over and over again at a rapid pace. And as a photographer, I thought, well, I can start documenting these places. And with the help of Basha and Kathleen, the three of us, we put together a beautiful long list and we hit the road. And it was around 2019, I think we shot for 2 years without a publisher at all. We started shopping it around, and we had a very reputable national publisher right out of the gate give us an offer. And we were thrilled. And as a matter of fact, it was even a more lucrative offer than what we wound up with eventually. But they had one caveat, and it was that they want us to change the name of the book to Down East Style. And so right there, we realized that we had a battle ahead of us, that, like Maine preservation, that we really wanted to get a point across. With that, I'd like to read a quote that a journalist named Heather Chapman wrote about our first book that we have loved so much that we put it in the introduction to the second book. And she wrote that our book was a plea to preserve a living history belonging to individual, family, and state, a visual call to recognize these homey structures and others like them as extraordinary gifts. The authors have gone into these old homes and salvaged something we'd do well to hold on to. The understanding that when the last cottage is crumbled and family farmhouse flattened, so goes the unrenewable character and charm that is uniquely Maine. And so our second book has some wonderful stories about families and individuals who made those hard choices as their families expanded or aged out, or people who had moved on, and how they handled, bringing their homes into the modern age and their families into the modern age through their homes. And we're very proud of it. And we'd love to talk about, some of the individual homes that are portrayed in the book.
So would you like me to go ahead and talk about a few houses that are in there?
Absolutely. And
Okay.
I'll share my screen so I can put some pictures while you
My name
talk.
is Basha Burwell, and I'm a co-author with Kathleen and Maura. And I'm a stylist and art director, and I wear many hats in the process. And one of the exciting things for me about, the first book was extremely exciting because we had an incredible reception to it. And then the second book, which just came out about a week ago, and so we're very much in the second book mode right now, although they're both incredible, is we got to shoot a cottage that has been in my family since 1910, and it's called The Cottage. And a little bit about it, a little bit about me is that I grew up in Portland, Maine, with Mainer parents who grew up in South Freeport. And on my father's side, he has been somebody who's lived in the Portland area and does restoration of old apartment buildings by hand on the side. He does that kind of in addition to his work. And then on my mom's side, this cottage has been in our family, as I mentioned earlier, since 1910. And we've just counted, and I think there are 62 family members who share it. So as Maura mentioned earlier, as we've seen all of this change happening up and down the coast, this happens to be in the village of South Freeport. It's one of the last slightly, most untouched old cottages in that area. And we really we take a lot of pride in the fact that we've changed virtually nothing. I mean, I think we've redone the chimney and the fireplace because of a crack, but it's really about our commitment as a family to come together, we open it together, we close it together, we work on it, and we all we share the financial responsibility and also just the maintenance. And as you can see with this kitchen shot, it's pretty much no nonsense. Probably those faucets date back to when it was first built. I'm not really sure. But this was a really, for me, a very, very special thing to be involved in. And because we're documenting this cottage that means so much to my family. But throughout both books, one of our tasks and one of our challenges was just to be on the hunt for these kinds of places that families are able to preserve and keep, as they were meant to be originally. And there's a second property that I thought we might just touch upon in the book. And it's on a lake in Maine. It's now owned by this family named the Finleys. And the house was first owned, I think it was actually, it started out as like a hunting camp on a lake and owned by one family for 90 years. And then when we went and met with the homeowners, the new owners, the Finleys, they taught us a lot and talked to us a lot about what their whole history has been. And they've owned it now for, I think, almost 30 years. And they chose to buy it with all of the contents in it and then restore it to its original state as well. And so when we were photographing it, we would open closets and open drawers in the kitchen, and we found these incredible molds and baking tins and it's filled with taxidermy from the previous owners. And of course, the now owners are not hunters and not taxidermist collectors, but they just feel so much pride and so much, they are taking so much honor and wanting to preserve the original family's vision of what this place meant. And I'll end my piece by saying that a friend of mine was looking through our books recently, and she said, it makes me have nostalgia for the things I didn't have. You can feel all the stories in the walls and the plates. And I think you can feel that in many, many, many of the properties and the photographs that live within both of these books. So with that, I'll pass along to Kathleen so we don't take up too much time, but thank you for inviting us. It's a real honor to be here. All right.
Kathleen?
See if our third partner can
unmute. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There you
Sorry.
are.
Sorry about that. I'm Kathleen Hackett, and I wrote both the Maine House and the Maine House II with my lovely partners. One of the interesting things about making this book is how everyone asked us how we decided what houses to put in the book, particularly the second one, just because we had gotten going after that first very successful volume. And the three of us decided we really needed some kind of, some parameters, if you will. And I had been reading something for some other thing about Jonas Salk and his famous quote that asks if we are being good ancestors. And I spoke to these guys and I'm like, okay, I think this is it. The question is, can all the people in this book say that they're being good ancestors? Meaning, are they working to preserve, protect, renovate, rehab, do whatever they can to save these homey structures that the journalist referred to? And to a house in the second book, we can say with certainty that every single person is. There are a couple of examples that sort of stand out, and they happen to be largely in this one small village on the coast of Maine. One is called one that the owner humorously called the house that nobody wanted, because in 1989, when they bought it, it was kind of falling into the ground. But it was on the main sort of drag in this village, and it was just deteriorating. It's been sitting there empty for 20 years. It had been many things, lots of additions, willy-nilly, but it had the very beautiful bones of a Greek revival. And so they undertook the restoration of this home, you know, going so far as to build the windows as the way that they were when it was original. They added column porches, they added yards and yards of siding, a widow's walk, although they say that might be a little bit of an aberration, but they're sailors, so that was meaningful to them. But the owner said, you know, I didn't really have to go very far to find references for this house. They were all surrounding me in this village. So I just took my cues from the house next door and the house next door to that, and turned this into a very wonderful, personal, loving sort of a home for raising a family on the coast of Maine. Another example is their neighbor, not too far away, who this house was for sale several years ago, and this is an example of how community can really impact the saving and preservation of a house. There was talk of knocking this house down to build a parking lot for the library next door. And the community sort of gathered and petitioned to prevent that from happening. And so the owner put the house on the market just by herself. She put a little sign out there, and a gentleman went to look at it, and he said that as he was looking around in this house, which was, you know, covered in pink wallpaper and plush carpeting and all kinds of things that weren't really suited to him, the woman said to him, I can tell that you're going to own this house. By the way you're looking at this house, you're going to be its next owner. And it was because of his sort of passion for, again, this sort of Greek revival style, and his commitment to keeping the integrity of that vernacular in this village, where that is the overarching architectural style. And lastly, in this same village, my husband and I had been walking by this house for 20 years. And I would always say to him, that's my house, that's my house, that's my house. A tiny little cape on the harbor. And we were growing out of our little camp that we had in a nearby town, and the house happened to be for sale. So it was just by sheer providence that it did become our house. And when we bought it, I think the neighbors all thought that we were going to knock it down and build something bigger. It's only 1,100 square feet. But we knew the history of this house and of this neighborhood. It was one in which artists and musicians used to stay in the summer and rent these little fishermen's cottages. And being an artist and a writer, we felt this sort of connection to keeping it that way. So, you know, the upstairs bedroom the pitch is sort of tough for a 6-foot-tall man, but we refused to put a dormer in there because it would ruin the integrity of this shingled roof. And everyone always asks me why I don't blow out the kitchen and expand it. And it's very tempting because that's part of my work. But as a really good friend who is an editor of architectural magazines pointed out to me when he came to see this house, he said, you know, Kathleen, you pull one thing and the whole thing unravels. And I think about that all the time. When that feeling sort of overcomes me, I was like, yeah, nope, I'm not going to do it. So anyway, those are 3 examples of, you know, people who are committed. And I feel like the theme that runs through all this is refusal, which is kind of a Mainer's sort of characteristic. There's a lot of refusal going on here where, you know, there's a gentleman in the book who has a Usonian house up in Deer Isle, and there's a giant tree that's growing in front of that blocks his view of the water, but he refuses to cut it down because the tree is way too important to the integrity of the property. And there are many stories like that, which just make our hearts pound when we hear them.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Thanks to the 3 of you, Maura, Kathleen, and Basha. I'd now like to turn it over to Tess Chakkalakal, whose new podcast is going to take us inside of literary homes across Maine, including the Harriet Beecher Stowe House in Brunswick, on which we hold a preservation easement. So Tess, there you are, popping up, and I will show your flyer.
Thank you, Tara. Thank you, everybody, for inviting me. My name is Tess Chakkalakal. I teach at Bowdoin College. And the way I got involved with old houses was I helped to renovate the Harriet Beecher Stowe house, as Tara mentioned. And now it's sort of open to the public. There's a Harriet's writing room, which is not really open to the public anymore since COVID, but we are working on it. My idea grew out of my work on trying to save the Stowe house. Together with my colleague in the English department, Brock Clark, I've put together this podcast. It's called Dead Writers, Great American Writers and Where They Lived. Season 1, I hope there will be a season 2, but season 1 is 7 episodes. It was supposed to be 8 episodes, but Harvard wouldn't let us into W.D. Howells's house in Kittery. So they've kept that closed to us, but we do have 7 houses and you see them listed here. Actually, one is not a house. One is James Weldon Johnson's bench to mark where he was killed in a train accident. And we're still in production right now. We managed to raise over $50,000, mostly from private donors, though we also had Bath Savings help to sponsor a couple of the episodes. And we're in production now. The episodes will be aired on Maine Public Radio starting after Independence Day on July 4th. Every Sunday, they're supposed to air at 6 p.m. I would encourage you to listen to the podcast. It's supposed to be funny, bantery. We learned a ton from the people we talked to at these house sites. It's meant to be sort of educational, but that's sort of a sidebar. It's mostly meant to sort of raise awareness about these houses, the people who work there, how they've been preserved or not preserved, the communities who populate them. And if you have any questions, I'd be very happy to answer them. I've included a QR code to our Give page if you're interested in giving to it. I don't want to reveal too much about the episodes because I want you to listen to them. We just got the music for the episodes, which I guess I could play for you if you're interested. What do you think? Would that be? Because, you know, it's all audio, so I don't really have a lot of visual stuff. This is our music. Can you hear it? And that's the Dead Writers theme music.
Good.
Great.
You're going to be hearing our voices pretty soon alongside that, and the voices of many others from across these different literary sites. We also go to different special collections, libraries as well. But I think it'll be good. I think it'll raise awareness about these old houses and the writers who live there.
Amazing. That's great.
Questions? If there are any questions, I'm happy to take them, but otherwise, that's my spiel.
Well, before we move on, I guess I just have a question, Tess, of maybe what was the most surprising thing you learned in experiencing these places?
I think the most surprising sight, I mean, was how these houses, not unlike what happened with the Stowe house, just kind of developed. So the interesting thing, there was the Hawthorne house, which was kind of started by just a group of community activists who got together and wanted to preserve these houses, turn them into community spaces. I didn't know much, I don't know if you guys do, about the Edna St. Vincent Millay childhood home in Camden that was actually purchased. I can't remember her name, but it's the woman who started Burt's Bees. Bees Fortune, you probably know her. And that was a really interesting insight and how she became involved in trying to preserve the Edna St. Vincent Millay house. So I think what was really surprising is who got involved in these houses. The Longfellow house was kind of obvious. The Sarah Orne Jewett house was obvious because it was the families who had passed them down and then got them to be open to the public. But the ones that were kind of saved by the community, how they got saved, the story about how they got saved, that was really interesting to me.
And can you share anything about your own story of preservation with the Stowe house and perhaps anything you know about how we got involved?
Well, yeah, I mean, the way the Harriet Beecher Stowe house, it was first purchased by Bowdoin College before I got there. And then they kind of wanted to turn it into a parking lot, or they were mostly interested in the parking lot around the Stowe house. And then I was able, with some students, to learn more about the history of the house, not only that Stowe wrote Uncle Tom's Cabin there, but also that she harbored a fugitive slave there. So now the Stowe house is on the Network for Freedom, or more commonly known as the Underground Railroad. And because most of the house had been renovated after Stowe moved out of the house, it was difficult to make an argument for how to renovate it. And it was with Maine Preservation's help that we were able to figure out how to renovate the house in such a way that would restore some of there was no really history in terms of Stowe's time in the house, but at least to bring it back to when she lived there. Does that make sense, Tara? You want to take it from there?
Sure. I mean, I wasn't there for it. I just more recently had the experience of sitting with you in the writer's room and kind of imagining what else can happen there in its next iteration. But really pleased that you got involved along with other faculty, and that then we were able to help at the time in terms of visioning, and then also placing an easement on the property so that it is forever saved, because it is one thing to have a singular act of preservation, but it never stops.
That's amazing. That's great.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, we'll see if we have more questions for you, Tess. But I wanted to sort of take my privilege as host here to ask a couple of questions. So finally, we have Meadow Dibble from Atlantic Black Box, who's going to tell us about a new initiative, Walk for Historical and Ecological Recovery, which seeks to examine the ways that Indigenous, Black, and settler descendant populations figure in our commemorative landscape and collective memory. So I think we are seeing.
Yes, sorry.
Screen. That's okay.
I hit the wrong button. I wanted
That's
to
okay. This evening is rife with technical difficulties, so it would be untoward if you actually.
Great. Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for the invitation to share a bit with you about our work. I am not at the beginning of my slideshow. Let me go back. There, that should work. Really pleased to be here. I've loved hearing about these various projects. Tess, I'm a big fan of your work, and the Cottontown exhibit, and the podcast. And I had the privilege of working on the James Weldon Johnson commemoration a couple of years ago that produced the bench that now sits in Wiscasset Common. So Tara asked me when asking if I'd come speak with you all this evening, if I could somehow sort of frame the conversation around a house. And I was coming up blank because really the work of Atlantic Black Box currently involves getting everyone outside of our houses and walking together across the land that we now call Maine in a project we're calling the Walk for Historical and Ecological Recovery. In fact, a series of 7 walks that will take place in 7 sites across the state over the next 7 months. And I'll tell you about that, but it occurred to me that, in fact, I should begin by telling you a bit about Atlantic Black Box. And the best way to do that is to talk about our origin story, which has everything to do with this house. This is the house of Captain Elijah Cobb, the most famous sea captain from my hometown of Brewster on Cape Cod, where I was born. And it is, it was built in 1799. The sea captain came back from a voyage to find that his wife had bought the property, and jokes in his memoir that she ran him into debt building this house. I have always loved this house. I remember going to the chicken coop when I was a kid, picking eggs and visiting the folks who lived there at the time. It really is at the center of my childhood neighborhood, my childhood universe. And so when I found myself living back in my hometown in the 2010s, raising my own children right there where I myself had wandered as a kid, I was thrilled when the Brewster Historical Society launched a campaign to renovate the Elijah Cobb House. And that effort was the end result would enable the Historical Society to actually move in and make this their home. I'm all about historic preservation and was a big fan of the Historical Society. So I supported the effort and I contributed financially to this in my own small way. And it was only months later that I came to learn that that house had a sordid past. My town, I never really would have suspected that anything sordid hid behind the facades of our beautiful sea captains' mansions. We're quite proud of them. We've taken great care to preserve them over the centuries. Brewster can, in many ways, feel like a living museum. The sign at the center of the image you're looking at was carved by my own father, who carved many of the headstones in our town's oldest cemeteries. And it was, in fact, as I was walking with my children through the cemetery behind the First Parish Church in Brewster, called the Sea Captain's Church, that I ran across a headstone. First time I'd ever seen it, although I'd been running through that cemetery, since I was a kid. Benjamin Crosby died in Africa in 1795. And when I saw this headstone, I stopped short, and a number of realizations hit me all at once. I was standing over an empty grave. Benjamin Crosby had died and was presumably buried or thrown to sea 200 years before I had flown off to make a life in Africa. He had died there. So a young person from my hometown had been where I had been, only I felt sure he'd been there with very different intentions than myself. And it was in that moment that I also realized exactly what I had to do. I had I had studied in West Africa. I had studied African studies. I had taught African literature and film at Colby College. And I'd walked away from that academic career, understanding that academia was not the place for me. And that's when I found myself living again in my hometown, only with a new set of eyes that allowed me to see what had been hiding in plain sight all along, this reality that, in fact, the men who built my hometown, the wealth that built my hometown, was deeply connected to slavery and the slave trade. In fact, going back to that house I showed you at the beginning, that of Elijah Cobb, I learned that he, Cobb, had been to Africa on 2 separate occasions at the end of his long 40-year seafaring career. And thanks to the folks at the Brewster Historical Society, I learned that he had produced a memoir. And so you can imagine, in my eagerness to try to understand what it was the people from my town were doing in Africa, I got myself a copy of the memoir. I could tell you a long story about why it's fortunate I got this particular edition of the memoir. But the short story is, Cobb did not write about his African voyages at all in his memoir. He left them out. However, the editor thought to mention these voyages in the foreword, and he appended a couple of letters that Cobb wrote to his wife off the coast of Africa to the end of the book. That was fortunate because there remains nothing of Elijah Cobb's archive. What you're looking at here is a sea chest that belonged to Elijah Cobb. This was acquired by the Brewster Historical Society a couple of years ago. As you can see, it's quite empty. Of course, it's empty. But where are the contents? Where are the first-hand documents, the primary sources that would have been in that box in the past? The ship manifests, the ship logs, the correspondence with his investors, etc. Where had it all gone? It was nowhere to be found. It had not been kept. And yet, this is a man who was extremely careful to preserve his legacy. What he left us was a carefully crafted narrative and virtually no primary source documents that could tell us about what he was actually carrying in the holds of all of the vessels that he captained and commanded over the course of that career. So I, at the time, had been writing a memoir about the years I had lived in West Africa. I stopped writing that, realizing that there was no way that I could actually write that book or think to know who I was, to understand my own self, until I understood what had happened in the place that had raised me. So I talk about historical recovery. This is, as you can see, this is a black box. They're not black, actually. They're bright orange, and that is by design so that in the event of a fatal crash, should an airplane crash to the sea or to land, if you can find the black box, you can reconstruct the events that led up to that tragedy. Because a black box is what? It's an archive. It faithfully records critical flight data so that we can understand what happened, not to satisfy our curiosity, but to ensure that it never happens again. We here in New England, in the place we now call New England, did not have a faithful black box on any of those vessels that were sailing out to sea. In fact, what we have are a bunch of empty boxes. The maritime record here in New England is very visibly, it's full of holes. and silences. We know that some of those documents went up in flames with the burning of customs houses, unfortunately, in many of our port cities, Boston, Portland, etc. But not everything can be explained through mere accident. We also have documented cases of intentional suppression of that evidence of New England's participation in the slave trade and in the economy of enslavement more broadly. So we created Atlantic Black Box. I launched the organization back in 2018 as a way of inviting people all across this region to collectively pick up a shovel and begin digging right there at the local level to help unearth these suppressed stories. And Atlantic Black Box then serves as a platform where people can share those stories, but also as a resource hub. So we invite scholars, historians, community researchers, et cetera, to help inform our historical recovery efforts, our attempts to surface this history. And as I said, this year, we have launched a big project, a big collaborative project that we're very excited about. 7 walks and 7 sites over the next 7 months. The first walk begins June 22nd in Portland. These are the organizations that we're collaborating with. Really all organizations committed to racial justice in one form or another, and many other partner organizations coming on to support the work of surfacing and communicating these histories. So I'm sure I don't have time to go through and describe in any kind of detail what journey lies ahead, but I can share with you the link to our website. So of course, Atlantic Black Box has its own website, but the Walk for Historical and Ecological Recovery, for short, WARE 2024, has its own independent website where you can find more information about all of this. And with that, I'll stop my share and happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Meadow. I'm just putting the link in the chat, and questions for Meadow or for anybody else who has shared their work with us this afternoon. See some friendly faces, some of our trustees and members. Any questions for Basha, Maura, Kathleen, Tess, or Meadow?
I don't have a question, just to comment that this was just a terrific part of the meeting to have these authors and talk about the black box, and again, just very, very important work that you're all doing, and to thank you all for investing the time and the energy and the effort to do that. It's very powerful, very good. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Dan.
Just a comment also, it's always interesting to me to see the passion of people when they create a project that takes in directions they weren't really expecting. And preservation's really good at that. It does take you places that really, create a sense of place, and all of your books and the podcast will certainly accomplish that. I'm looking forward to getting them and listening.
I have a quick test. You said 6 o'clock on Maine Public Radio.
That's what we're aiming for. That's what we're aiming for, Basha. But there'll be an announcement soon enough when we're all ready, and I'll let Tara know, and she'll send it out. Part of the stuff is really hard to get the word out, but it'll start airing in the summer, and then after that, it will live as a podcast on Spotify and Apple, wherever, what they say, wherever you listen to your podcasts. Podcasting is very new to me, so we'll see what happens.
You have a good voice.
You have a good voice for it.
Yeah, it's by the way, it's a 29-minute episode. Each episode is 29 minutes.
Oh, that's great.
Which is about as long as I can stand a podcast for. Yeah,
So, yeah.
that's why it's 29 minutes.
We want to, and I'm giving a plug here, but on our first volume, the first property we shot, actually, this is kind of neat, was E.B. White's house, because it was being sold and we really wanted to catch it before it wasn't available to us. And so that was a big kind of star in our cap,
Cool.
but we're excited to listen.
Yeah, he's not on our list, just
No.
because it's a kind of 19th century thing.
Yeah. I was just weaving things together, but yes, we're excited to listen to it.
Thank you, everybody.
Meadow, can you tell us a little bit about what the walks are anticipated to be like? As you know, from our conversation, it sounds like they kind of, I mean, because they're organized with partners, that they're going to be a little bit different in each scenario, and that they're certainly not a traditional history tour in any way. In some instances, maybe more of a visual. Can you talk a little bit about what folks might expect if they're to join you?
Sure, thanks. So yes, absolutely. Each of our partner organizations is curating their own walk, except in the case of Atlantic Black Box, which is sort of, has helped to build the infrastructure and is supporting our partners throughout. And in particular, we are co-curating 2 walks, the first and the last. So the Portland Walk, we're working with the Third Place, a network of BIPOC professionals here in Maine. And for the final walk, we are collaborating with York History Partners. Each walk will absolutely be different. They're certainly not historical walking tours. If you can imagine something that has elements of a historical walking tour, but tends more toward a sort of a march, a civil rights march perhaps, or a walk for the cure, if you've participated in any sort of lengthy walks. For the Portland Walk, I can describe in a little bit more detail. Folks will be walking for a number of hours. So we'll actually cross the peninsula from the West End to the Eastern Promenade, and then we'll cross over, and our culminating point will actually be in Falmouth at Maine Audubon, because we feel that there's great value in actually getting outside of the thing that you're looking to understand or reflect on. And all along the route that we've traced for the June 22nd walk to Unsettle Portland, participants will have the opportunity, they will be sort of confronted with historical encounters. So these will come in the form of signage, audio. There will be stations where people may interact with them. But the idea is to move sort of seamlessly together through the landscape, and to take note of the commemorative landscape, or what we call the memoryscape, to note the absences and silences, but also this effort to re-presence or to inscribe in this ephemeral way on the commemorative landscape the stories that have not been told, and to invite participants to reflect on how do we create a more inclusive memoryscape. I might just mention one other walk. The August 17th walk in Norwich Walk will be curated by our partners at Wabanaki Reach. Norwich Walk this year is so what's taking place this year is the 300th anniversary of the horrific Norwich Walk massacre that absolutely devastated the indigenous community of that place. And so it's Wabanaki Reach that will be organizing that walk. It's entirely up to them to sort of decide what elements and what partners they want to bring in, and we'll be there to support them. But each of our walks, in a sense, is connected, and we're inviting people to participate really in as many points along this journey as possible, in an effort to connect these dots. That massacre at Norridgewock was committed by people from York. So it was commanded, and it was led by raiders coming up from York. And so the November York Walk will make acknowledgement of that town's role and its early settlers' role in that atrocity.
Thank you so much for giving a little bit more context and color to that. No, I'm gonna mark my calendar, and also for airing Tess podcast, and I'm gonna buy Maine House too. So we will try to keep you all apprised of all the goings on with these projects. And thank you all for speaking. Thank you all for coming to listen, for participating in the members meeting, for being a member, for being a trustee, an advisory trustee. Just really appreciate all of this good support that we have to do the work we're doing, and so glad to collaborate with everyone here. So thank you and have a great evening.
Thank you, Tara.
Thank you.